protest the Cedars. Don't shut down our family farm.
Quite a few questions and stuff, Before we go any further, I'd just like to stop for a little while to answer some of your questions you had. And Mr. Cedars, you want to make a comment on some of these questions? You more familiar with the ordinance than we are?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. First off, the issue with Mr. Broussard's property is twofold. One, it involves, if this ordinance passes, a potential violation of the ordinance, number one. Number two is, whether he wants to admit it or not, he's using that property as part of his business endeavors, period. That property is zoned R2, mixed residential. It's not zoned to accommodate the activity he's conducting. He's been told that. And he was told that way back in the fall of last year. And let me just give you, I think we need to have another lesson and instructions on how this ordinance came into being. It just wasn't solely Mr. Broussard's activity, okay? He did purchase this property September 17, 2020 for $90,000. His sale is recorded in book 1833, page 271, entry number 539478, conveyance records of this parish. Immediately afterwards, he started hauling tree stumps and related vegetative materials associated with his service. The parish government received complaints. So what did we do? According to the file that we have, a nuisance complaint, we went out and investigated. And here's a copy of our file, our nuisance file. There's an email in that file to Mr. Broussard where it states a parish government has received complaints and a parish government representative has spoken to you via telephone, and you were advised of the zoning classification of R2. The email goes on to state, and I quote, Duchamp Road is zone R2, mixed residential, which does not allow business or debris dumping of any kind without going through the rezoning process. Close quotes. November 4th, 2020. The email also requested information about an alleged mushroom farm that Mr. Broussard had told our personnel he was going to be engaging in at that site. So we asked for information to confirm that endeavor so we could evaluate it against our ordinance, our zoning ordinance. And that was the sole issue with him at that time. We didn't hear a word from Mr. Broussard. November 20th, 2020, we re-urged that request. He responded, Mr. Broussard responded on December 3rd, 2020, quote, sorry for the delay. I have been working on it and will have it for you soon. That same day, there's a note in the file reflecting that he spoke to Ms. Morgan Alamont and to Calder Hebert, her direct supervisor, about this issue. December 11th, 2020. Mr. Hebert, our Director of Administration, and Ronald Solari, our Compliance Officer for our Planning and Zoning Department, visited this site and spoke to Mr. Broussard. And on that day, Mr. Broussard admitted that there was tree stumps and the like and other vegetative material being hauled to the site in connection with his tree service. A commercial activity, period. He referenced the mushroom farm idea, and again, Mr. Hebert requested information about that endeavor. We had a meeting in my office where I reviewed with that department all of our outstanding nuisances, and when it came to this particular file, I requested Mr. Solari and Mr. Hebert, look guys, if Mr. Broussard is continuing to operate, I want to cease and desist letter submitted to him. Well, nothing happened until the week of July 15, 2020. Nothing happened that came across my desk. Now, according to the file, according to my conversations with our administrative personnel, we never got any information from Mr. Broussard about his mushroom farm. And as I said here today, on August 3rd, 2021, we still have no information. But in any regard, on June 15th, more complaints started coming in. As a matter of fact, the June 15th, the complaint was urged to us by one of the members of this parish council who had received a complaint from a constituent. So the fact remains that there's a commercial activity taking place on this property. There's the hauling of trees and other debris, dumping at that site, which calls into question, in my view, potential DEQ and in Louisiana Department of Agriculture regulations. And I might also add that on this date, we confirmed that additional businesses were being allowed to bring vegetated material to that site. Don't know what you call that, but I call that bulletproof. It's a commercial activity by more than one person. As late as July 29, 2021, we had a neighbor tell us he has observed another firm or tree service dumping there on Duchamp Road on Mr. Broussard's property. Now, that this ordinance might be directed only to Mr. Broussard's property is simply not true. He just fits the umbrella in part. Half that umbrella may be this ordinance, the other half is our zoning ordinance, period. And we have reached out to Mr. Broussard and asked, hey, come sit with us. If you want an exception, there's a process to follow. You just can't ignore that process. You can request a variance or a zoning exception. It'll go through a process. Planning and zoning will have a hearing. And whatever that decision might be or recommendation for planning and zoning, guess who it comes to? You. That process has never been followed. Let's go back to the week of June 15th. Let's look at June 16th. At that time, at 9:44 a.m., I received a text message from Representative Hewall about materials being dumped on Division Road in the St. Martin side. Through my conversations with Representative Hewall, it was decided that the representative would contact DEQ directly to see if we could find out who might be dumping. And I think there was some investigation conducted in that regard. Again, June 6th, it actually was June 16th when I had the opportunity to speak with one of your council members who had urged that complaint I referenced earlier. On June 17th of 2021, our compliance officer went, as a result of another complaint, to Mr. Broussard's site and observed large trucks from Mr. Broussard's company parked on that facility, on Duchamp Road. Then, on June 17th is when I contacted an attorney who handles these nuisance matters for us, Mr. Durio, and requested that he contact Mr. Broussard by letter requesting that he cease and desist from any activity on those premises until such time as we could resolve these issues, period. That same week, June 18th, 2021, have another complaint that comes into our office. Mr. Travis Soler, supposedly burning on debris, vegetated material near Armand Joseph Road. We received not only photographs but videos of that situation. So here again, we have a third complaint, same type of activity. That case, by the way, a cease and desist order was immediately delivered, prepared by me, and delivered, hand-delivered on that date to this individual, who subsequently was sued. You can go to the case of St. Martin Parish Government versus Travis Hilaire, docket number 090761, Division B, 16th Judicial District Court, St. Martin Parish, where we filed for injunctive relief against the individual because of the burning. It is scheduled for trial on August 24th, 2021. So any kind of indication, any kind of innuendo, any kind of reference that we're somehow singling one person out is improvident. And it's refuted by the facts of this case, by the facts of this situation. I've met with Mr. Broussard and urged the same request. I've heard all different types of scenarios as to what that property is being used for. You have heard different scenarios as to what the property is being used for, but no solid substantiation, one, and secondly, and more importantly, we still have our zoning ordinance issue that has to be addressed. Interestingly, August 2nd of this week, I received a call from DEQ, from a caseworker, I suppose that's what they would call them, the permit department, who advised me that several tree service companies have contacted his office in the last several days, guess what for? To request permits for the transportation and hauling of the debris and an open air permit to burn. Why? Because we were going to require people in that business to follow the rules. Wow. Furthermore, in my conversation with that individual from DEQ, he advised me that essentially in matters like this, 2 permits are required. A waste permit to haul and the air permit to burn. There can be some exceptions if you go through a process. Also, this individual told me that Mr. Broussard himself had that day requested and received a permit to haul. August 2nd. This matter, let me remind you, came before our administrative offices way back in November. Furthermore, I was informed in that conversation that there's only 2 services in St. Martin Parish that are following the rules. One of those companies I talked to several weeks ago, who's all for this ordinance, by the way. You know why? Because it puts everybody on the level playing field. This man in the tree service business told me it cost him $60,000 to bring his property up to standards so that he could dump on sites to burn. The other service is located and does business within the city of Breaux Bridge. Mr. I don't want to use the individual's name, but the person from DEQ did ask me if the parish would work with haulers if they needed some sort of relief in terms of zoning regulations, because he conceded, hey, we're not going to give a permit if it's not zoned for it. My response was, of course we will. But you've got to go through a process. If you poison the process, you have no rule. If you poison the process, you play politics. That's not what we're doing. Period. And it's very frustrating. You know that, how hard it is and frustrating nuisance issues are to begin with. We discussed the ordinance with that DEQ official. He felt it was a fairly good ordinance. Gets better. I got a lot more notes, but it gets better. Because just today I received a telephone call. Didn't write the time now. This is about 2:30, 3 o'clock. Mr. Aber, I asked you to sit with me when I received the call. About the time, wasn't it?
Yes, sir.
From Commissioner Mike Strain. He said, look, I read the ordinance, or the council's ordinance, that they're going to consider. Pretty good ordinance. I suggest one change. That in paragraph C1, in the exceptions, you, instead of just using the word agricultural, you use agricultural and forestry lands. Use that term. Period. For the life of me, I don't understand the objections to this ordinance. It seeks to put everybody who does business on a level playing ground, and it doesn't involve just this gentleman. It involves anyone who transports vegetative materials and dumps them in our property, or on our properties, and or burns that debris. But again, members of the council, we have a process to analyze and evaluate these, and we need this ordinance. It's a crying shame that we've got to go to court to keep somebody from burning something in a neighborhood after they've transported it from probably outside this parish or from another location. Really and truly. So I support this ordinance. I think it's a good ordinance. I don't think it's discriminatory, and I think it's very clear. I'll thank each and every one of you who called me, because we made some amendments to it as we've gone through it. And that's how government works. And I never once argued one issue with you. The changes that were suggested were good changes. And we went through a process to adopt this ordinance. It was introduced. As a matter of fact, the day I prepared, I think I wrote you an email explaining to you why this ordinance was being introduced. And then we sat down at a meeting, introduced it, came back at our committee meeting, and I talked about it again. And I think I even talked about it in my report to you. And we're here tonight to enact it. You're not moving too fast. As far as issues about storms and hurricanes, let me remind you, we're aware of that. If there is a storm and there is debris, we got a pre-positioned contract to collect that debris. After Hurricane Laura, we picked it up ourselves because the amount didn't warrant us igniting that pre-positioned contract. Now, we did ignite it after Delta. And there is a place in emergencies where the debris can be brought to a landfill permitted in the name of St. Martin Parish government to burn under emergency circumstances. This ordinance, thanks to Mr. LeBlanc, clearly provides in the amended portion, subparagraph D, that someone can clean their own yard, their own debris, and burn it on their own property. It doesn't eliminate that. And or bring it to another piece of property that person owns to burn. What you can't do is have a third party transport it for hire to another site and burn or dump, nor can you circumvent our zoning ordinance. That's all. I think it's a very good ordinance, and I think it protects our public as a whole. I'm not worried about any interpretation. I think it's clear. That's all I have. I have more, but that's all I need to say.
Anyone have any